Hey guys, Dantix here, back with another Borderlands 4 video. This time focusing on Amon the Forged Knight, a bulky barbarian looking warrior that was part of a tribe of murderous vault monster worshipping cultists, until a vault monster wiped them out. In this video, we're seeing some new footage of his action skills, as well as running through his skills, augments, and capstones. Amon has a passive that essentially gives him a second action skill button and ability. For example, let's take a look at Crucible. Activating it normally will have your forged drones assemble themselves into a fire and frost axe. You press a button to select one and throw it out. However, activating the secondary mode slams two axes together and throws them out like a boomerang. Both these abilities have separate cooldowns. There are skills in the skill tree that modify these abilities in different ways, but essentially Amon is a very action skill and elemental focused Vault Hunter, as well as having a lot of options for melee and utilizing melee at range, which we'll see soon. Amon has 3 trees that can be mixed and matched with points. The only investments you'll make that are tied specifically to a particular action skill are the augments and capstones, but you actually don't need to put points into these. You just need to reach their tier by putting 5 points in the row above them. So these augments and capstones will change the action skills. Here we see Hammering Moment, where Amon now equips a forged hammer instead of axes. Here's the skill tree, but note, a lot of information is missing due to this being translated by Maxroll from an event in China where they got to try the character out. It's lacking the exact wording of his passive trait and has roughly translated names for the skills, but exact numbers are subject to balance changes before release. So let's start with Onslaughter. So Amon overloads his iron making, gaining continuous post-protection recovery, bonus firearm burning damage, and increased movement speed. You then press the button again to launch a rocket fist, rushing forward to the target enemy and causing burning melee attack within the close range, while causing the enemy to build a map. Now, overloads his iron making, gain continuous post-protection recovery, and map are all mistranslations, but you can kind of discern what they're saying here. Boss enemies cannot be adjusted, which means boss enemies can't be stunned, and there's a chance of misidentification. So what I can gather from this action skill is you activate it, you get continually buffed and you do bonus fire damage, and then if you activate it again, you charge at the enemy and launch off a rocket fist. What they don't show here is what you get as the secondary action skill, which is that you slam down this massive elemental hammer. It has a long cooldown and does a lot of damage in AoE. The first skill is Driving Force. It's a killing skill and it increases Amon's shield recovery rate and movement speed for a period of time. Then we have Burning Heart. It increases Amon's burning damage, which is great because Onslaught adds more burning effects. Then we have Chaos. Amon gets melee critical strike chance, which is just always going to be good because a lot of things use melee damage, like Onslaught, like your Crucible, and so on. Then we have Heavy Plate Armor, increases Armor's maximum shield capacity and maximum overshield capacity. Then with 5 points in the tree, we head down to Master the Storm, increases Armor's status effect damage and duration. Like I said, he's a very elemental focused Vault Hunter. Then we have the first augment, Pyroclastic. While on the attack, Amon fully regenerates his health and shields and is surrounded by a Forged Storm, dealing bonus status effect damage over time to nearby enemies. So I assume this means once you activate the ability, it'll now give you this burning AoE effect, which is pretty nice. Keep in mind, it's going to get bonuses from Burning Heart, it's going to get bonuses from Driving Force, and so on. Then we have a Punch to the Stomach. Combat damage and ordnance damage have a chance to inflict weakness on the enemy for a period of time. Weakened enemies deal reduced damage and take more damage. Weaknesses are affected by status effect duration and are considered status effects. So you can see this is going to make you even more elemental. Then we move over to the second augment, Thermal Diffusion. Rocket Fist now has 2 modes, increasing its radius and dealing bonus damage based on Amon's maximum shield capacity. So you'll get a new keybind, letting Rocket Fist deal freezing melee attack damage instead of burning, so you're changing up essentially what your skill is doing and how it's applying damage, so things like Burning Heart won't be applying to it. But what we can see from the footage is that cryo damage is quite effective, it freezes very often. Then we have Titanium Alloy Finger Tiger, increases Amon's melee damage and skill damage. Pretty straightforward. The next tier down, we have a single point skill, Steel Forging. After Amon activates the forging skill, he'll be temporarily immune to all damage. And this lasts 6 seconds, so this is just a way to tank you up, as you will be able to use this quite often. Then we have Bullet Storm. When Amon applies a status effect, his gun damage is increased for a period of time. You'll be applying a lot of status effects, especially with things like Pyroclastic, where everything around you is just going to start burning. Then we have Impulse. When Amon causes gun damage, his active skill cooldown rate is increased for a period of time. And this is another way to keep that gun damage up, as you'll now be able to increase your cooldown rate for your action skill, and the action skill is already a short 50 seconds. Then we have the Strongest Defense. Amon gains a overshield when dealing melee damage, and you'll be dealing melee damage not just in melee. If you throw out, say, your axes from Crucible, that's counted as melee damage. If you slam your fist into him with Onslaughter, that's melee damage as well, so you will be gaining more and more shield. Then we have 3 paths for the Onslaughter tree. The first path starts with Violent. When Amon activates the forging skill, he'll enter a frenzy state for a period of time, gaining immunity to frostbite and slow damage, while his gun damage and melee damage gain damage. So you'll be gaining damage over time, making you quite potent. We have the Augment of the tree, Fallen Frost. Press it immediately after launching a Rocket Fist, and Amon will use a follow-up attack, causing a large area of freezing melee damage in front of Amon. Non-boss enemies with less than 25% total health will be killed immediately. So a nice little color effect, and especially useful if you want to add freezing melee attack damage. Then we have Bloodthirsty. When Amon's shield is broken, he gains Bloodlust for a period of time, increasing his reload speed and life steal. So another Berserk-like effect, but this time giving you life regeneration, keeping you tanky for longer. Then moving down a tier, we have Only Blood Red. It's a killing skill, so when Amon kills an enemy while in a frenzy, so it means this particular skill above it, the duration of the frenzy will be partially restored and the bonus frost damage will be increased. The bonus frost damage part leads me to believe it only applies to Violent, but it could also apply to Bloodthirsty. We'll just have to test it out. But either way, it's pretty good. Frost Breaks. When Amon's shield is broken, it partially restores its shield and detonates, dealing cryo damage to all nearby enemies and freezing them. But this is another way to add cryo damage and keep you tanky. So you can kind of discern the theme of this particular branch. Full of Energy increases Amon's maximum health capacity. The higher his health, the more melee damage he causes. So you tank up with all of these and you deal more damage. Then the final tier. When Amon causes melee damage, there's a chance to activate a killing skill. So we have a killing skill here, and we also have one at the start, Driving Force. So if you were going down this branch, I would recommend picking up Driving Force as one of your opening skills. Then we have the capstone, the first capstone of this tree, Frost Blade. Scorching Smash is now Frost Blade. Hold F to swing a giant forged axe, sending a wave of forging that deals icy melee damage and freezes enemies it passes through. Enemies killed by Frost Blade will explode, dealing frost damage. So this, like most capstones, completely changes how the skill functions. Now you're not focusing on Incendiary, you're focusing on Cryo. This whole branch here is to tank you up, and by tanking you up, make you deal more melee damage, and then convert your damage to Cryo. I've always liked Cryo a little bit more than Incendiary. I like trading off the extra damage for the ability to CC or crowd control. So let's move over to the next branch, Into Battle. Amon's damage dealt and damage reduction increases based on distance from the enemy. The closer the enemy, the higher the bonus. Alright, so we're getting up close. The first augment is Force of Nature. When launching an onslaught, causing gun damage to an enemy will put them into a ready state for a period of time. When they die or are damaged by a forging skill, they will detonate, causing burning damage to nearby enemies. So we're turning them into walking bombs because your forging skill is, of course, Onslaughter and its secondary property, which is to slam down that hammer. So you will be readying them up, they will be exploding, dealing more AoE damage. Next is Burn the Barrier. The higher Amon's shield value is, the higher his fire rate and status effect rate will be. This is yet another passive among many that either tank Amon up or benefit from tanking him up. So you won't just be feeling like I'm surviving these attacks, but I'm not dishing them out. You will continually be dishing out a lot of pain while you're providing yourself with more survivability. Then we have Omen. It's a killing skill, increases Amon's melee damage and maximum shield capacity for a period of time. Now you might be wondering if you can reach this and get Death Touch. Yes, you can. You have 49 skill points at least at release, which means you should be able to reach the completion of one branch and get to midway on another and even into another. However, across multiple trees, you won't be able to reach the capstone in each. Then we have Rearm. When Amon uses melee attacks to cause damage, some of his current gun's ammunition will be replenished, just to keep the pain going. So melee damage, then gun damage, then melee damage, then gun damage. It's almost like you're reloading by using your fist. Then we have Crippling Blow. Gun critical hits will have a chance to inflict weakness on enemies for a period of time. Weakened enemies deal reduced damage and take more damage. Weaknesses are affected by status effect duration and are considered status effects. Now, this is very similar to a punch to the stomach, so if you want to pick this up as well. Then we have the capstone of the branch, Rushing Lava. Scorching Smash's radius is increased and it stores damage. After a delay, fire breaks out at the feet of up to 3 enemies. The pyre deals additional burning melee damage based on the damage stored by Scorching Smash, splitting the damage among remaining targets. So this simply increases your output of your Onslaughter ability by hitting them again with built-up pent-up damage. This of course is Incendiary, and if you're really leaning into an Incendiary build, this branch will help you there. The last passive is Deadly Flare. When Amon kills a weakened enemy, the enemy will explode, dealing burning melee damage to nearby enemies, so another walking bomb effect of sorts, because you do have Crippling Blow and you do have a punch to the stomach to weaken enemies, and then you can capitalize on those weakened enemies with your gun/fist attacks with Rearm and your Rushing Lava and so on and so forth. So this is about rotating between your fists and your firearms, weakening enemies, getting up close into battle, then rushing lava them all down with your increased stored damage and your lava plumes. The final branch of the Onslaughter tree has Catastrophe. When Amon applies electric shock to the enemy, its critical rate is increased for a period of time. When Amon inflicts burn on an enemy, its critical damage is increased for a period of time. Both effects can be stacked independently. So you can gather where they're going with this tree. The first augment, Explosive Fist of Rage. When launching a fierce attack, the effect rate of Amon's status is increased. Now it says lightning wave damage. We need to continue further into this tree to understand what that means, but the fierce attack just means your gauntlet smash attack, which you get from Onslaughter. Then we have Dragon's Breath. When Amon activates his gun, his next gun bullet is converted into incendiary damage, staggering enemies' damage and increasing damage dealt. Boss enemies cannot be staggered, but villain enemies have a chance to be staggered. So it doesn't give a boost to damage, but it does convert the bullet into incendiary, which could boost damage based on if it's hitting flesh, hitting shields, hitting armor. Then we have Trial. Amon deals increased melee damage to enemies with less than 50% total health, so another culling effect. Then we have Rock Fist. When Amon causes melee damage, a certain percentage of the cooldown time of the forging skill is restored. The forging skill being your secondary action skill, the one that we don't see here, the hammer. The other 3 action skills have forging skills as well. Then we have Explosive Aegis. According to Amon's shield value, his status effect damage and ordnance damage are increased. The fuller his shield is, the stronger the effect. Once again, tanking up makes you hit harder. Then we have Electronic Flame. When Amon burns his enemies, he also electrocutes them, and when he electrocutes an enemy, he also burns them. Now this is making a lot more sense. This obviously doesn't occur in an infinite loop, burning them, then electrocuting them, then burning them. It only applies once, but it is a very potent effect because Storm Guillotine, Scorching Smash, the hammer attack, is now Storm Guillotine. Hold F to swing the giant forged sword, launching a forged wave that hits all enemies it passes through, dealing electric melee damage. Each time you hit an enemy, you'll recover the active skill cooldown and active skill duration time and ordnance cooldown time. So you're converting your hammer to a giant sword that does damage in a line. I'm sure it looks very flashy, but the main point of this is shock damage does incendiary damage does shock damage. You're getting the application of both. So that's what this branch is all about. This one is about tank equals damage equals incendiary damage. This one is converting your damage to frost. So like I mentioned, Amon is very elemental focused, but what I also said was everything is about melee damage. So as you can see, everything in this tree is focused around melee damage boosting in some way. If you boost your melee damage, you're going to do more damage with Storm Guillotine. You're going to do more damage with Rushing Lava. You're going to do more damage with Frost Blade. So that's the Onslaughter tree. Let me know below what you think so far. Equipping yourself with badass weapons is nothing if you don't equip yourself with powerful hardware. To get the most out of Borderlands 4, you should check out the new PNY NVIDIA RTX 50 series graphics cards. I was lucky enough to get my hands on a 5090, and let me tell you, it's going to be hard to play games any other way. ID Tech native ray tracing delivers next level graphics fidelity, speed, and visuals. AI powered DLSS 4 with multi-frame generation boosts FPS to insane levels. I'm getting over 200 frames per second on a 4K resolution. For gamers and creators, these cards are unbeatable. So thanks to PNY and NVIDIA for helping me make the videos I want to make. To find out more, check out the link below. Okay, let's move on to Amon's next tree, Crucible. So we mentioned this one before. Amon will be equipped with forge axes, which can be thrown and picked up off the ground to refund cooldown time. You'll also notice they lodge into enemies, which shows them being primed for detonation. Mouse button 1 throws a flaming axe, dealing burning damage. Mouse button 2 throws a frost axe, dealing freezing melee damage. And on the controllers, it's your left and right trigger. Enemies damaged by the forge axe will be in a ready state for a period of time. When they die or are damaged by the forge axe, they will explode, causing damage to nearby enemies. It's similar to the priming effect in the Mass Effect series. Now, the forge skill, the secondary skill you get for equipping this, puts the two axes together and throws them out like a boomerang with a very low cooldown, similar to the cooldown of this skill of 20 seconds. The first passive is Cast Iron. It improves Amon's forging skill cooldown rate and gun control. Now, if you are in the Onslaughter tree and you like using that giant melee hammer, which has a huge cooldown, getting something like this, the Cast Iron passive will be really good for that because it does decrease the cooldown. Like I mentioned, getting the passives in other trees still affects the action skills, which are a focus in another tree. Then we have Before the Storm. It's a kill skill that increases elemental damage caused by Amon for a period of time when you do get that kill. Then we have Executioner. It increases Amon's critical damage. After dealing melee damage, this effect is doubled for a period of time. Dealing melee damage with Amon is very easy. All your action skills do it. And especially Crucible, which has a very low cooldown of 20 seconds and has multiple ways of you getting more charges. Then we have Speed Up, increases Amon's reload speed. This effect is doubled for a period of time after detonation, and many of you who follow this channel know I don't like reload speed increasing passives. I just think these other three will be better for you in most cases. Then we have Destroy the Bionic Body, increases Amon's forging skill damage and detonation damage. So far we have two skills that are focusing around the forging skill itself. Then we have the first augment, Axe and Stone. Detonating the flaming axe will restore the active skill cooldown. Detonating the frozen axe will restore your ordnance cooldown. You can also use melee attacks to detonate readied enemies. After Amon damages an enemy with his forged axe, his movement speed will increase for a period of time. So if you use your incendiary axes, you'll be able to use the axe skill more often, your crucible skill more often. If you use the cryo axe, you'll be able to use your grenades or your throwing knives or your heavy weapons which are within that ordnance slot much more often. A simple augment but effective because it applies for other things that want your action skill to come out faster or your ordnance to come out faster. Then we have Tempering Fire. Forge Drone skill. When Amon activates the forging skill, it will spawn a tomahawk forging drone that will attack nearby enemies for a period of time, causing burning melee damage. If the tempering pyre is already active, activating the forging skill will fully restore the duration of active forging drones, so they last 20 seconds, and you're essentially summoning in minions, temporary minions. We've seen them before, they're floating axes that go off to enemies and attack passively. It seems quite effective for increasing your overall DPS. Then we have Endless War, the next augment. Each layer of Ready to Fire increases the firearm damage taken by the readied enemy. If Amon detonates an enemy in preparation, a new forged axe will be created, which automatically searches for nearby enemies. So this is another way to create your forged axes, and each axe sticking into the body of an enemy increases the firearm damage they take from them now as well. So you might want to wait to detonate them. How do you detonate? Well, you lodge a forged axe into an enemy, then use your forging skill, the one where you slam the two axes together and throw it into the enemy, or you can simply kill the enemy and that will detonate them, damaging everyone around them. Then we have the next passive, Operational Cerebral Embolism. While Amon is reloading, his gun gains bonus electric damage for a period of time. So this is one way to eat your vegetables and get in some shock damage, letting you take on shields a little bit easier. Then moving down a tier, we have Bellows. When Amon activates the forging skill, his gun damage will be increased for a period of time. Now I did mention his forging skill has a low cooldown, so this will activate quite often with Crucible, but not so often with something like Onslaughters because there is a huge cooldown for that hammer. Then for only 1 point, we have Twin Rages. Tempering Pyre now spawns an additional axesmithing drone that deals frost melee damage. Forging drones from the refactory have a reduced cooldown. So essentially what this is doing is giving you another melee companion, but this one deals cryo melee damage. So you have an incendiary and a cryo one going at all times, essentially because it's very easy to get these up. Then we have Vital Organs. It's a killing skill. Amon gains gun critical hit rate for a period of time. So you kill something, you get critical hit rate. It's just a way of increasing your DPS. Then we have Harold's Call. It increases Amon's electric damage. Pretty straightforward, but it works with the Operational Cerebral Embolism. Now we have the 3 different branches. Once again, you invest in this branch, you can go down to the next tier, but you can't go into the next tier of another branch, so these are completely separate. The first branch and first skill is Tempering Ice. When Amon activates his ordnance, he'll spawn a hammer forged drone that will attack nearby enemies for a period of time, dealing freezing melee damage. So this is another melee companion between your Tempering Fire, between Twin Rages. This is another way of getting out another minion. So is this a way of making Amon a minion class? We'll have to see. Hammering Moment. We mentioned this before, but it's an augment that lets him equip a forged hammer instead of forged axes with a choice of frost or shock effects. That's why we don't see a red one. Enemies damaged by the forged hammer will be in a ready state for a period of time. When they die or are damaged by the forging skill, they will explode, causing damage to nearby enemies. So it's a left click for the frozen hammer, causing ranged freezing melee damage upon impact, and a right click for the electric hammer, causing ranged electric melee damage on impact. So just a way to change up your Crucible skill. Then we have Noise. Increases the damage and detonation radius of Amon's ordnance. So if you like ordnance and want an ordnance build, I would recommend going with Rafa so far, but Amon does have ways to buff them up as well. Moving down, we have Masterpiece. Increases the damage and duration of forged drones, and that does affect Tempering Ice. Then we have Endless Bombing. When using a grenade, there's a chance that it will be returned automatically. Heavy weapons have a chance to return 1 ammunition when they deal damage to an enemy. So we saw Rafa has a way of really focusing on grenades. He has all the ways to throw out free grenades. However, it seems like Amon is more focused on ways to use heavy weapons. Once they run out of ammo, you'll unequip them and they'll go on a cooldown. So this effect will make them last a lot longer. Then we have Excited and Excited. When Amon causes ordnance damage, his firing rate is increased for a period of time. Now this means you could throw out a grenade, deal a bit of damage, and then you have increased fire rate, or it means you can whip out a heavy weapon, and that is doing ordnance damage and keeping the stacks coming for fire rate. So once again, if you want a really heavy ordnance focus, Rafa has a lot more options, but if you really want to focus in on heavy weapons, this might be the branch for you. Moving down to the final tier, we have Hammer of Destiny. Hammer Forged drones can now deal ordnance damage in addition to their original damage types and have a chance to trigger a detonation when damaging an enemy, causing area freezing damage, and obviously if you're leaning into ordnance, this is very good. Moving on to Snow Hammered, which is the first capstone of this tree. Hold F to throw your twin forged hammers, dealing freezing melee damage to nearby enemies on impact and ricocheting up to 3 times between nearby enemies. If no ricochet target is found, the hammers deal additional damage before self-destructing. Each time a detonation is triggered, an additional ricochet occurs. So this is very good at clearing out mobs, but more importantly, if you're facing something alone, this will hit them multiple times, so it's actually good against bosses as well. So by holding F, you actually activate your forging skill. So this is where you slam the 2 axes together, and this capstone changes it up to make it twin forged hammers, but most importantly, making it ricochet and hit the same target if no targets are found, and detonating and so on and so forth. So this branch is all about summoning additional minions with a side focus on ordnance damage and especially on heavy weapons. Moving on to the next branch, we have Blast Furnace. When Amon or his forged drones critically strike an enemy or create an explosion, increases the damage he deals. Detonation awards multiple stacks. So you definitely want to pick this up if you've actually gone down into this minion build here, because it does work with the forged drones you make with Tempering Ice. The first augment of this branch is Blade Storm. Amon will now be equipped with a forged sword with a choice of fire or electric effects. When enabled, all charges will be consumed to the fire or forged sword barrage. So this is the effect we see where he throws out multiple swords. Enemies damaged by the forged sword will be put into a ready state for a period of time, just like the axes and the hammer. When they die or are damaged by the forging skill, they will detonate and cause damage to the target, but will not harm nearby enemies. So this is less about area of effect damage and more about single target damage. So you press left click or left trigger for the flaming swords, dealing burning melee damage, or you press right click or right trigger to fire a barrage of electric swords, dealing electric melee damage. So converting your axes to swords makes them more of a single target focus. It also notably adds the shock effect. Then we have Tempered Lightning, Forging Drone Skills. When Amon activates the active skill, it will generate a sword forging. This is a melee drone that will follow enemies around and attack them, causing electric melee damage. If Tempered Lightning is active, activating the active skill will restore a portion of the duration of all forged drones. So now we have this, and this focused around forged drones. So keep that in mind if you're creating a forged drone build. Moving down a tier, we have Contempt Armor. Amon gains a overshield when he deals damage with active skills. Having a bit more tank is always good. Then we have Lightning Rod. Amon's gun bullets have a chance to generate elemental thunderbolts when they critically hit, causing electric shock damage. So anything that gives you more critical is going to help here. The spawn rate is 25%, so it will happen quite often. You will be bringing down the storm in this tree, and you'll see that as we continue. Next is Gradually Rise. It increases the attack speed and movement speed of the forged drone, which will of course benefit Tempered Lightning, benefit all of these and all of these. Moving down, we have the capstone of the tree, Storm Surges. The double-edged blade now surges the storm. Hold F to throw a twin forged blade, causing an area of effect electric shock on impact. Storm Surge will generate a forged storm for a period of time upon impact, continuously causing shock status effect damage. So if you want to summon a storm, you have your Lightning Rod passive, and you also have Storm Surges. Then we have Sharpen the Tip, the final passive of this branch. Forging drones have a chance to critically strike. When the forging drone critically strikes, a part of Amon's active skill cooldown will be restored, meaning you can do the Storm Surges more often. So this branch, like the previous one, does have a bit of a focus on the forged drones, but mostly focuses on shock damage, creating lightning storms, creating your swords, which also do shock damage. And you'll notice that shock and flaming swords tend to work well together, as incendiary is good against flesh and electric is good against shields. The only thing you won't be hitting very hard is your armor. The next branch we have Permafrost. When Amon freezes an enemy, a freezing hazard source will be generated under the enemy's feet, causing freezing damage for a period of time. Now, hazard sources are good with cryo damage because freezing a target means they stay on that hazard for longer. So simply see this as more DPS. Then we have Burning Cold, the augment of this branch. Flaming Axe will now pierce through enemies, and Frost Axe applies freeze on impact. Now, we've seen in a lot of footage that the Cryo Axe actually does freeze quite often, and also freezes mini bosses from what we've seen, and applies the frost effect on actual bosses. So if you like crowd control, this is the direction you want to go, because it's extremely powerful instant freezing. Now, when it comes to Flaming Axes piercing through, this is more niche, but I won't judge if you like this effect. Active skill damage has a chance to critically hit and burn enemies. So that means your cryo axes can now burn, and it also means your incendiary axes have a higher chance of burning. You get the idea. Then we have Wild Heart. Increases Amon status effect damage and hazard source damage, so that will increase the hazard damage of permafrost above it. Then we have Freeze Burn, which is this whole tree. When using firearms to cause burning damage, the freezing damage is increased for a period of time. When using firearms to cause freezing damage, the burning damage will be increased for a period of time. So you want both a cryo and incendiary weapon in your loadout. Therefore, you'll be able to swap between them based on what you're fighting, and you'll still be applying the other damage type. Then we have Reactive Armor. Detonating restores some of Amon's shields and ordnance cooldown. So by detonating, you'll become more tanky. You want to use your main axes and then detonate with the forging skill or by killing the enemy. Then you get some of your shields back and you can continue the pain train going. Then the final passive of this tree is Reverse Explosion for 1 point. When Amon deals blacksmith damage, I think that means forging damage, he will spawn a drone singularity for a period of time. Now, I don't know what this singularity does. Maybe it sucks in enemies towards it. Maybe it deals damage. Maybe it explodes. We'll just have to see. However, Flaming Boomerang, the capstone of this branch, makes it so causing an explosion or damaging an enemy with a fire boomerang will restore the cooldown of the blacksmithing skill, which is the forging skill. The double blade now deals burning melee damage from 2 directions with a larger radius and leaves a trail of fire while flying close to the ground, dealing burning damage over time. So this branch is, if you really like the axe effect, this one's about hammer effects, this one's about sword effects, but this branch has more of a focus on freezing your enemies, crowd control, only really modifying how the baseline skills work by adding a boomerang effect to the forging skill. It's about incendiary and frost damage together. So you have a lot of options within the Crucible tree. Once again though, everything is melee damage. So getting guns that have increased melee damage attached to them is really going to help you out with this tree and with the Onslaughter tree. I like how they make melee damage not completely irrelevant, because your skills are going to be utilizing them, your forged drones are going to be utilizing them. So you don't actually need to walk up to an enemy and use melee in order to get a benefit out of it. So let's move over to the next tree, Scourge. Amon will equip a shield to absorb all frontal damage and convert it to Vengeance Fire. When Vengeance Fire is full, the shield will provide damage reduction. If Vengeance Fire is not obtained within a period of time, it will be quickly consumed, so you have a short period to get this buff. Pressing the button again will activate the Forging Wave, dealing freezing damage to enemies it passes through, consuming damage from the Vengeance Fire boost. Now we know the forging skill, the other skill attached to this that is active on another cooldown, will create a firewall effect. So this seemingly is a more defensive action skill, but we'll see quickly with the augments and the capstones that it's not the case. The first passive is Nature's Wrath, improves Amon's status effect application rate and freezing efficiency. When it activates the active skill, this effect is doubled. Once again, we know what Amon is, we know he's all about that. Scorched Earth Kairos increases Amon's gun damage and magazine capacity, increasing your DPS. Real Excitement, Amon gains health restoration. Each time Amon takes or absorbs non-status damage, he gains a layer of resoluteness for a period of time, increasing this effect. So this is a way to tank you up. We know with previous skills he likes having high health. Then we have Scar Tissue, increases Amon's maximum health capacity and repair kit healing amount. This is the first instance where his rep kit gets buffed. It's a new item that essentially lets you heal by pressing a button, but it also can provide other buffs and effects based on what the item says, similar to equipping a grenade and it providing different effects based on the item equipped. Moving down a tier, we have Eternal. Increases Amon's active skill duration and gun switching speed. So you'll be able to switch more often and you'll be able to keep your action skill up more often. Then we have the first augment, Crackling Chill. Forged Wave now consumes more Vengeance Rage and explodes on impact, dealing area of effect freezing ordnance damage. If the Forged Wave passes through the firewall, which I mentioned before, it will further increase the blast radius. So you want to set up a firewall first, and then you want to build up your vengeance, and then you want to send that wave out through the firewall, dealing huge damage to a lot of targets. So with this augment, you'll have a way to combo. Then we have Comet Tail. When Amon causes ordnance damage, there's a chance that the frozen status effect will be applied, causing continuous cryo damage for a period of time. Comet Tail is affected by status inflict rate, which can be buffed with other skills. So if you like using ordnance and you like cryo, this might be the passive for you. We have the next augment, Freeze Beat. When launching the whip, Amon will taunt the enemy and send out a freezing pulse every second, causing freezing damage to the enemy and restoring the health of allies. When aiming, Amon's movement speed is reduced, but Amon's guns will gain bonus frost damage and each shot will consume vengeance. Now, the whip is what you use when the shield is out by activating the ability again, and at a baseline, it does freezing damage. Do note that this taunts enemies, so it's the first way in a co-op match that you'll be able to keep your allies safe. Moving on, we have Born to Fight. The higher Amon's health is, the more gun damage he gains. When Amon is at maximum health, the effect is doubled. So I mentioned he gets bonuses from having high health, especially with scar tissue helping out in that department. This is the payoff. Moving down a tier, we have Hail of Bullets. Amon's bullets have a chance to ricochet as elemental echoes, causing frost damage, and yes, this does stack with Jacob effects. So if you like frost damage, if you like ricocheting, this might be the one for you. Then we have Mechanic. It's a killing skill. Amon restores a percentage of ordnance cooldown time when he kills. So these can obviously stack together. If you've got a heavy weapon out and you're killing a lot of things, you're going to get your cooldown recovery much faster. Then we have Ancient Way. Increases the frost damage dealt by Amon. Now, from what we've seen, there's a lot of cryo damage in this tree. Next, we have Warrior's Cup. If Amon uses a rep kit when launching an active skill, the duration of the active skill can be partially restored. So another way to utilize rep kits, if you use it during your action skill, you're going to get more action skill. So it's better than just healing you, it heals your action skill recovery rate, which is fantastic. Then we have the 3 branches. The first one starts with Wildfire starts a Prairie Fire. Interesting name. Increases Amon's ricochet damage, burn damage, and burn duration. So yes, that does apply to Hail of Bullets. And yes, I just said there's a lot of cryo here, but this branch is going to make it Incinerary. We can see that with the augment of the tree. Forged Waves is now Fiery Rebuke. Consume all Vengeance Rage and hurl your forged sword at the target enemy, dealing Incinerary ordnance damage that ricochets on impact. Fiery Rebuke ricochets additional times based on Vengeful Rage spent. When throwing a forged sword, damage absorption is disabled until it returns. So you're dealing Incinerary ordnance damage if you've boosted your ordnance or Incinerary or both damage. This is going to do quite a lot, and it also gives you a sword to throw out. Very cool. Then we move over to Burning with Anger. It's a kill skill, using burning damage to kill an enemy, and you'll gain a layer of fire adaptability for a period of time. The stacking of fire adaptability will be increasing your reload speed and active skill cooldown rate. So you want to go hard in Incinerary damage if you go down this branch. Then we have Ballistic Barrier. Amon gains an overshield when dealing ordnance damage. So you want to go hard Incinerary and ordnance damage. When Amon applies Incinerary to an enemy, his rate of fire will be increased for a period of time. Burn it, baby, burn it. Then we have World Destroyer. When Amon lands and slams, he consumes all fire compatibility stacks to create a fire fissure in front of him, dealing burning melee damage to all enemies hit. World Breaker deals bonus damage for each stack of elemental compatibility consumed. So if you like jumping off things and slamming down to the ground with a hero landing, this is going to be very effective for you. I personally don't find many opportunities to do this, so this wouldn't be a passive I pick up, but there's plenty of points you can put in both of these if you are like me. If not, enjoy. Then we have the last passive of this branch. It's a kill skill, so when you kill, you restore some of World Breaker's cooldown. I think that means the World Destroyer passive, so when you kill things, you're going to restore some cooldown, you're going to be able to do it much more often. However, without having the capstone of this branch, we can't really compare it to the others. Unfortunately, this is the one thing we don't have access to right now, but you can be sure it's going to modify your action skill or your forging skill in a way that deals incendiary damage. So this branch is all about incendiary damage and ordnance damage. So if you like explosions, if you like fire, this will be the branch for you. The middle branch, however, is the complete opposite. Ice Rage. It's a killing skill. When you kill an enemy with freezing damage, you'll gain a layer of freezing adaptability for a period of time. The stacking of freezing adaptability will increase the damage of your gun. This does stack with Burning with Anger. It gives you a different kind of adaptability stack, and then these consume each adaptability stack, including Thunder's Fury over here, which is another adaptability stack. So you can go a full World Destroyer build if you really want to. I foresee this doing a lot of damage to make up for the fact you need to climb up somewhere high, jump and slam down. Then we have Eternal Winter, the augment for this tree. Forged Wave now partially restores the duration of active skills and Firewall when damaging an enemy, and can be activated up to 3 times in a row. The third time it's activated will fire a giant Forged Wave that deals higher damage and does not consume Vengeance. So this is going to increase your DPS by quite a lot. Then we have North Wind. Amon's gun critical hits have a chance to inflict additional slowness on the enemy with the same effect as Frost when causing freezing damage. The chance is doubled when activating an active skill, so this is really going to increase your CC rate if you have a high critical rate. Next we have Winter's Kiss. When Amon causes ordnance damage, it will consume the corresponding number of frozen adaptability stack layers according to the number of nearby enemies, generating tracking echoes and causing ranged frozen damage. So what you'll be doing is storing up frozen adaptability stacks, then activating your ordnance, be it a grenade or your heavy weapon or your throwing knives, which causes a number of echoes to burst out of you and hit enemies for cryo damage. A really nice effect. Then we have Primal Surge. When Amon applies a status effect to an enemy, there's a chance to restore some of his shields and ammunition. You'll be applying a lot of status effects because, well, everything Amon does applies elemental damage in some way. So I can't imagine this ever not being good. Then we have Ice Age. Amon deals increased damage to frost enemies and bosses. Now, I'm not sure if this means if the enemies are frost based or if you've applied the cryo effect to the enemy, and I think it is the latter, which would be very powerful because it's a flat damage increase. The final passive of this branch is Impact Debris, and I think that goes up to 30%. So when you get Winter's Kiss, which does a percentage of damage dealt, which is going to be quite a lot of damage, that can ricochet to other enemies, letting you spread the frozen effect and deal a lot of damage. The capstone of the tree is Glacier Mania. Firewall is now Ice Frenzy. Who didn't see that coming? Hold F to swing your forged steel whip, hitting nearby enemies twice and dealing frost damage, then slamming the ground, creating a frost rift that deals frost damage and leaves behind a source of frost for a while. So essentially, you're doing cryo damage in this tree with a splash of ordnance here and there. So this is all about cryo, this is all about incendiary. Now, without seeing the capstone like I mentioned before, we can't be sure if this World Destroyer passive, which a lot of these are focusing on, will be tied to the capstone in some way. That's what I assume. It's going to just activate this World Destroyer effect without having to jump and slam into the ground. And if so, these are very different trees. But if not, this is simply just incendiary. This is simply just cryo. Let's see what the next tree is about. But I think you all know where we're going with this. Blackout is a passive that makes it so ordnance damage has a chance to critically hit, which will shock the enemy. I'm sure you're all really shocked. Then we have the Augment of the Tree, Storm Spear, which we've seen in some of the footage. Forged Waves is now a Storm Lance. Press a button to forge a spear, causing shock damage on impact and consuming revenge. Rage increases the damage done. Enemies damaged by the forged spear are poised for a period of time and will detonate when damaged by the forging skill, aka your firewall, dealing shock damage to the target but not to nearby enemies, so it turns it into a single target high damage skill. Firearm critical hits can also cause explosions, but the damage caused is reduced. So you'll be priming enemies and you will be detonating them very often. So if you like the prime and detonation effects, this is the branch you'll want to go down. Then we have Thunder's Fury. It's a kill skill. When you kill an enemy with electric shock damage, you'll gain a layer of electric shock adaptability. Stacking electric shock adaptability will increase critical damage. So that's one way to increase your critical payoff. Then we have, moving down a tier, Strategist. Amon's hipfire will increase his rate of fire, but reduce his gun control. When aiming though, it increases Amon's gun damage and gun handling. So you want to swap between hip firing and aiming down sights based on what kind of weapon you have and what kind of enemy you're facing. Then we have Smelting Furnace. It's a killing skill. Amon recovers a certain percentage of the cooldown time of the forging skill. So killing an enemy will let you use your forging skill more often, and there's a reason for that coming up. Then we have Thump Anvil. When Amon causes active skill damage, it consumes a layer of electricity adaptability and generates a forged thunderbolt to attack the enemy, causing electric damage. So obviously if you like shock damage, this is just going to amplify that because you'll be smiting enemies with thunderbolts now. The final capstone is Anger Descends from the Heavens. Firewall is now Wrath of Heaven. I told you the way for it. Press F to summon a giant forged sword as well to attack the target enemy, causing electric shock damage. Storm Strike is guaranteed to crit. So, big swords, shock damage, critical hit payoffs. What else do we have? Ultra High Voltage. Elemental Thunderbolt now staggers enemies and consumes an additional stack of shock adaptability. The damage done is doubled. Boss enemies cannot be staggered, and villain enemies have reduced chance of staggering. Danger, danger. So, the three branches. We have Incendiary damage, a splash of ordnance in there. We have cryo damage, another splash of ordnance and ricocheting in there. And we have shock damage with a splash of critical hit payoff. So those are Amon's three skill trees. What do you think? Do any stand out to you? Let me know below. If you liked the video, you know what to do. Thanks so much for watching, guys. For everything Borderlands 4, you're in the right place. Ciao, friends.